Okay, take your seats, please, if you would. Thank you. Wow, that was loud. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. We're on the last session for today, and Peter has had to disappear for an early train journey, so I'm kind of just finishing off the day from the chairman's seat. So for this session, which is all about background leakage and custom side leakage, I've got a very easy job, actually, because I can hand over to Frank van der Kleij, who is here, known to most of you. Frank is ex of Bristol Water and now a principal consultant at Stantec. And Frank is going to take you through this last session as the chair, and then I'll do a bit of a sum up at the end. So Frank, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much for still being here. It's good to see an almost full house, so leakage must be of interest to everybody somehow. It's really great to be here, and I can't believe that it's 8-9 months ago since we had our last conference, and there's so much work has happened since then. We had the Future Water workshops, which we will hear a bit more in this session, all the route map activities, the workshops, the Agria studies, and at the same time you all had to work through a really challenging summer and wet autumn. So I think we can give ourselves a good pat on the back, because it just means we really want this to work, and the challenges ahead are enormous, but we're doing a lot of really, really good and interesting work. So this session, we're covering two areas that have been discussed quite a bit this morning as well, and particularly when it comes down to data and insight. Both background losses and customer supply pipe leakage are really key areas. We need to know what is happening. We need to create that insight so that we can make the right decision, both from a reporting and leakage targeted point of view, but also kind of our long-term kind of ambitions. So we will start this session with Steve, and we got Stuart online. So he joins us for a couple of slides, pre-recorded slides. Steve will take over, and then we have a very brief question and answer session before we go into the supply pipe leakage side of things. And we've got another really good 3 example presentations on different approaches, and also some feedback on the workshops. So without further ado, I want to introduce Steve and Stuart. I'm not going to go through their bios, but these guys have 75 years experience together. They've been instrumental within both the UK and overseas in steering kind of direction and giving us tools, new tools to work with. So I can only applaud to both Steve and Stuart to be here today and present on their recent work on background losses, the innovation project and the portfolio project.
Thank you. So Stuart has recorded a little couple of minute video which just explain why background leakage is such an important issue, especially with the short and longer term targets that we intend to meet. Can we play the video?
At the 22nd Leakage Conference in March, I spoke about the background to background leakage and its importance to the Water UK route map, which defines background leakage as the level where leakage cannot be reduced further using current detection technology. The route map says that this can be altered by replacing pipes in the network, but also by reducing pressure in the network. And it says that it can change due to technological innovations that make detection more effective. It's this last point that is the focus of our work. I posed a simple strategic question. If background leakage is 50% of the total reported leakage, how do we halve leakage by 2050? Unless we reduce background leakage, we have to eliminate all other forms of leakage, which is clearly not possible. I suggested that background leakage may not be as defined in the managing leakage reports, and I proposed that we should consider MAL levels being comprised of several components that will vary in scale from one DMA to another. It's always difficult to challenge accepted wisdom, and that applies to leakage concepts developed in the UK 30 years ago that have been adopted around the world. However, unless we accept that background leakage as assessed through DMA MAL levels is not what we believe it to be, then the solutions we adopt to achieve our ambitious reductions in leakage will not be effective. Steve is now going to set out the work we have been doing over the past few months since the last conference, which reinforces the messages from 9 months ago.
Right. Okay, so there are two projects that we've been working on. The first is a background leakage club project, which 11 UK companies have been involved in. And we were really trying to answer 6 questions, all related to background leakage and what it is. So firstly, what's the level of background leakage? And what's that distribution of background leakage, especially across DMAs? What are the key components? And could some of that background leakage arise from errors rather than actually be real leakage? And I think we've seen a lot of stuff today. I think Stuart Maudett's presentation gave some insight into what might not actually be leakage. Then a really key question is, can we reduce background leakage? And if so, how can we do it? And finally, is background leakage as defined in the managing leakage report? So managing leakage reports, sort of 1994, nearly 30 years ago, and 2011, define background leakage as lots and lots of very small leaks. And what does the evidence say about that? So the way we went about this is we had a 2-stage project. First one is just asking water companies what they thought their background leakage was at whole company level. So a very simple sort of data request, which we've just reported here, which you've got is quite interesting ranging comparisons. And then the second stage was was using DMA data so to identify what the minimum achieved leakage levels were for all the DMAs for the companies that were involved. So we had 11 water companies, and they provided in total 16,000 DMAs of DMA's data. We then selected a lot of that data to provide some very high confidence results. So most of the results you see are based on about 8,000 DMAs data. There's also a literature review carried out. The literature review, there isn't a huge amount of published information about background leakage, but we reviewed that, which is in the final report. And then we did some error analysis, and we also looked at we did a bit of simulation of what background leakage might be, which came out with some quite interesting results as well. So there were sort of two sort of key concepts, which I think has been mentioned in passing by several people today. One of them is minimum achieved leakage. So what has actually been achieved in a DMA? And the other one is, which was a term coined in the early 2000s, I think, MABLE, minimum achievable leakage, a theoretical minimum. And there's at least 2 versions of what MABLE might be. So we've used, when we've been looking at minimum achievable leakage, we have been using the 2011 managing leakage theoretical good condition background leakage. So stage 1 results. So we had data from 11 companies, company level data, and it basically it comes out with quite a range of what companies think their background leakage is, but background leakage in DMAs averages about 51 litres per property per day. So, which is, well, you'll see in a minute, but that's around about half of companies reported leakage. That's slightly higher than we'd expect the minimum achievable leakage level to be. But there's a lot of uncertainty in that because of pressure data apart from anything else. And then in stage 2 results, we've got, we looked at the minimum achieved leakage level, and we ended up with a minimum achieved leakage level at DMA level of about 54 litres per property per day. So they're pretty similar. The sort of what water companies think their background leakage is and what the evidence shows from the stage 2 results, which indicates that there's not a huge difference between minimum MAL and MABEL in practice. So the stage 1 sort of whole company level data came up with this result. So it basically says that the background leakage is about 45% of total leakage, which compares pretty closely to our sort of assumption that we had to start with, which was that background leakage would be about half of total leakage. So it really supports Stuart's argument that in order to halve leakage, you've really got to do something about background leakage. It's just not possible to meet those targets otherwise. So for stage 2, we used 4 different methods to estimate what the minimum achieved leakage was, because we had data from 11 different organizations, and they've all got quite different ideas, well, different numbers in terms of household night use, non-household night use, and while accepting that water companies do have different levels of leakage, it's very difficult to bring all that data together and compare it equally. So we used a couple of methods which relied on the water company's own night use allowances, and we used a couple of other methods which were based on a relationship between average consumption and minimum night use. So that was, which is a ratio method. And we ended up using a 5 percentile ratio method, which we could demonstrate produced the lowest error, particularly indicated by the number of apparently negative lowest achieved DMAs. So that's the approach that we ended up using. So this is one representation of that stage 2 data. So each dot indicates one of these 8,000 or so DMAs. So that's our best estimate of the lowest achieved leakage level. So horizontal axis is 5 percentile night flow leakage, and the vertical axis is 5 percentile. Night flow leakage on the bottom, litres per property per hour, and vertically litres per kilometre per hour. And then the curves are this curly relationship, which tries to take account of both property count and length of mains. So you can see there's a huge spread, but one of the really obvious things that comes out of this is that whereas at company level or even sort of supply zone level, you can often identify a frontier level of leakage. There is no frontier level of leakage at DMA level. The most common result is very close to 0. If you look at the same data, so this is number of DMAs as a histogram. that's the distribution you get. So you can see that almost all of the lowest achieved leakage is down at the sort of 0 to 4 litres per property per hour kind of value, which is what you'd expect. And then there is a tail, and that tail allows you to, if you're going to investigate your high leakage DMAs, you want to know how fat your tail is, the tail of that distribution is, so that, and that governs how cost effective it would be to investigate those high lowest achieved leakage level DMAs. And so we've got a sort of Pareto curve for this, but in summary, about 20% of DMAs contain about 50% of the minimum achieved leakage. So if you wanted to halve minimum achieved leakage, if you could get those 20% down to 0, then that's one way of doing it. Okay, so back to those questions. Could some background leakage arise from errors in measurement and calculation methods? Well, the answer is yes. So we did a leakage error estimation approach, and we estimated that about 20%, with reasonable assumptions about what the distributions of error are, we estimated that about 20% of the minimum achieved leakage could be due to errors in leakage estimation method. Now, inherently, it's an estimate of the error, and so that's inherently very uncertain. I'm very willing to be persuaded it's much, much bigger than that, and I think, again, evidence today has shown that that might be the case. Next question, can we reduce background leakage, and if so, how? So, so this is one of the pieces of work we did with this. So these histograms have a number of DMAs across up the top, lowest achieved leakage level across. The blue values are the ones, are the actual numbers of DMAs. And then we did a very simple simulation of saying, well, in these two cases, let's assume that all our minimum achieved leakage is leaks of a single size, distributed randomly across the DMAs. Then what would the distribution of lowest achieved leakage look like? So I've got two examples here. So if you've got lots of small leaks, then the graph on the left, you see the graph on the left-hand side, the simulated values all tend to bunch around the average. But if you've got a much smaller number of much bigger leaks that make up this this minimum achieved leakage, then you get a much better match with the actual distribution. It's circumstantial evidence, but it sort of seems to indicate that that minimum achieved leakage could be a relatively small number of quite large but hitherto hidden leaks that have gone undetected for a long time. It could be, or it doesn't have to be just leaks, that could be undetected errors gross errors in estimation that have been caused by various issues. But a small number of large things rather than a large number of small things. So, I mean, trying to answer the question, is background leakage as defined in the Managing Leakage report? I think it's really unlikely that there's lots and lots and lots of tiny leaks that make up most of that background leakage. It seems to be that the evidence indicates that it could be quite a large number of hidden leaks that have remained hidden for a long time. And inaccuracies in measurement, and inaccuracies in the leakage measurement process or the leakage estimation process. So our recommendations from the project, I won't read out of all of them, but one of the key things is that I think there's a lot of smart meter data that's now become available from various companies, and that gives us a really good opportunity to pin down the calculation of leakage by comparing smart meter water balances to the what's now become the traditional way of doing it with night use allowances. So a continuation of this project in some form involving the use of smart meter data could help to really get a better understanding of what background leakage actually is. So that's, out of those, that's probably my key thing that I think we should go forward with. So that's the sort of club project. Now that club project was meant to be as a precursor to the Ofwat background leakage project as part of the which was financed as part of the Water Breakthrough Challenge. Okay. So it's a £3.5 million project over 2.5 years. And its aim is to show whether background leakage can be reduced by locating those long-running hidden leaks that the club project indicates probably do exist. The alternative is if this Ofwat project shows that when you look in detail in those DMAs, you can't find those long-run hidden leaks, then that gives evidence about something else being the problem. So the project's in. This is an indication of the sort of project process, but we are planning to take 25 DMAs across five water companies, instrument everything that it's possible to instrument in a set of those DMAs, build a twin of the DMA so that we can identify what we expect to have flows, pressures, temperatures, transients, and then we can compare to what we've actually got and then use the comparison to actually localize leaks. So it's a combination of some fairly sort of normal acoustic methods, but with some additional methods, including the sort of stopwatch temperature data method, but also University of Sheffield is also very involved with this project, and they're going to contribute a lot of transient analysis work to it, and also very extremely detailed hydraulic modelling. So instead of going all mains modelling, this is an all pipes model approach, where everything in that hydraulic network is modelled. Anyway, so we're using all of that to locate leaks, as many as we can, and explain what that lowest achieved leakage in those DMAs actually consists of. So I think I've seen several of the people that here today went to the workshop on the 12th of July. We've now got agreements with all the 5 water companies, ourselves, University of Sheffield, to collaborate on the project. We are just starting the initial work with Welsh Water, and I'm in the middle of selecting the DMAs for the other 4 companies. That's it.
Fine. Brilliant. Thank you very much. What time are we on?
Few minutes.
Suppose is there one quick question from the floor? There, Dean.
Thanks very much. Hi, Steve. Dean Marsh, say Artesia. So some of what is currently background leakage, is actually consumption then, because there will be high consuming customers in that set that you've said those high background leaks.
Right. We pre-selected for avoiding DMAs with high non-household consumption. And because we used this ratio method, we've accounted to some extent for unusually high household consumption.
Okay.
But yes, probably.
But I think in reality, you will find that there will be, households with consumption 10 cubic meters a day and in excess, and we see that when we look at the smart meter data. So step one, smart meter everything, find all the customer consumption. But really the question I had then is, if the minimum achieved leakage is a small number of big leaks, have you got any thought as to what those leaks might be? Because it would seem to me that they're A, very quiet, and B, not growing because you've been unable to find them. Well, not you personally, but us as an industry, you've been unable to find them. So any thoughts as to what they might look like?
Okay. So that very simple piece of simulation used an average leak size of 1,600 litres an hour, which for those that have been doing leakage for a long time, you might recognise as the estimate of an equivalent service pipe burst in 1994.
Half a litre a second.
Yeah. So they're relatively large leaks, but they're not so big as not to be detectable. I don't. In some ways, I don't really want to prejudge the rest of the project, but I would imagine that a lot of this is going to be on customer side. Even though they're quite big, you can have leaks that size that don't cause a customer supply problem.
Yeah.
And historically, when we've done these investigations, sort of fairly intensive investigations before, we've found things like private mains or mains that are not on records that are with significant bursts on. So you don't need a huge number of these in order to explain most of what seems to be background leakage.
So are you describing then what we used to call policy minimum? We've got a background level which is really driven by the way in which we do leakage, active leakage.
Yeah, well, this is minimum achieved.
Yeah.
So yes.
So change the policy and drive it down further.
Well, yes, yes. I mean, what we're suggesting is quite a radical change in policy. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Stuart.
Yeah, just to answer Dean's question, we found leaks on branches off mains, quite remote from the main that's shown on the GIS plan. So, the noise from that leak might not be being transferred back to where you're doing your sounding or fitting your acoustic loggers. And it might not be a leak. It could be a supply into an industrial complex, into a reservoir or a tank. One I remember was up in Scotland, which was a scour branch opened into a stream, which was about 2 miles away from where the trunk main was. And when we located it, we found that it was known about. It was known about by different people in the organisation. That's about 20 years ago now.
So I guess the big question then is how much more does it cost to find these leaks? Because what we're really saying is we're going to have to change the policy to be able to find these leaks, and that's going to potentially increase the sort of unit cost of ALC that we're all used to using. So that's quite important, I think, in the economics, because it could still be economic to drive leakage down to those levels when you compare the other options, such as mains replacement.
Within the project, we have done a little bit of work to look at the economics, Dean. We haven't presented it here, but it's available to the members of the club. There's some assumptions in there, obviously, but we do think as though using currently available techniques, essentially, if you follow the right process, it would be possible to drive leakage down below those minimum achieved levels. Not cheaply by any means, but probably
more cost effectively than doing mains replacement.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. I've got one quick question and then we move on, because there will be, at the end of the next session, there will be more opportunity to ask. I mean, this is a really key and important project, so there will be more opportunities. But my question is, you've got 11 water companies involved, so I'm sure you would like more companies involved, and they can come to yourself and Stuart. I think it's almost a must, to be honest. But those companies probably had a range of current leakage performance, from leading to possibly lagging.
Yeah.
Are the results showing very similar thing across the board? Or are there some interesting lessons to be learned within various echelons of performance?
There are significant differences. One of the things that stands out is companies that have a higher level of unmeasured households tend to have higher lowest achieved leakage. So there are some distinct differences between those 11 organisations. Yes. Okay.
Good. Well, Stuart and Steve, thank you very much. Clearly, this project is such a key project, and it is obviously part of the big questions in itself. Yeah, there was always an intention to drill into that element of background losses, and it seems you're making some really, really good, interesting headways into that process. I'm looking forward to further results on that. So, can we just put our hands together for both Stuart and Steve? Okay, we're moving on to now an easier subject, customer supply pipe leakage. So can I please ask the various participants, Paul, Martin, we've got Reese as well, just to join us here, and we start the presentation. Yeah. So the first session we start is on it's a Southwest presentation, Southwest Water presentation by Martin, and Martin Pipe is a customer leakage regional delivery manager at Southwest Water, and it's really good to have somebody like Martin here who's got 16 years experience in dealing with customer leakage. So customers, we mentioned customers a couple of times, so it's really good to get his experience and perspective on how Southwest Water has adapted their policies around supply pipe leakage over many years. So, yeah, looking really forward to your presentation. Thanks very much.
Just to be clear, it's not 16 years in customer leakage, it's 16 years in Southwest Water. Some of my background is metering, customer services and leakage. So what I'm trying to do now is bring all of that together with our policy for customer leakage. So, as Frank said, Martin Pipe, nice to meet all of you. It's the first time I've been to one of these events, so good to see all of you. We'll move on with the presentation is around how Southwest Water's journey has been in terms of dealing with customer leakage. From a service, it's always been a service element to now more an operational service that comes with bringing customers forward on customer leakage. So a bit of an agenda, as what we're going to cover off. So a little bit about who we are at Southwest Water, water supply definitions and statute, our policy history, so what we've been through, and interestingly, how we're doing now. And that hopefully something will spark some questions later is some future challenges. So who are we? Pennon Group. So we have supplying water to Isles of Scilly, Cornwall, Devon, parts of Somerset, Dorset, Hampshire and Avon. We also have sewerage services for the Isles of Scilly, Cornwall and Devon. We also have retailers, Pennon Water Services and Water to Business. So specifically today, talking just about the Southwest, we have more than 18,500 kilometres of water mains, approximately 1.7 million customers, and that's spread over 800,000 domestic connections and 70,000 business connections. Southwest is largely rural, and we've also got the responsibility of looking after 30% of the UK's bathing waters. So in terms of water supply definition statute. Hopefully everyone is familiar with this, but it's worth mentioning really. Supply pipes are not owned by the water company. Our customers are aware of this. I think there's a really big educational piece that we need to engage with customers more to make sure they are aware that that is not their responsibility, so that is their responsibility, not of the water company. We do have a statutory power to stop the waste of water through enforced repairs, not something that we have done for some time. And the figures vary a little bit, so between 20 and 40% of total leakage reported comes from customer supply pipes and plumbing losses. And in the room here and across the industry, there's a hugely variable customer support policies. So do we do enforcement? Who does enforcement? Free repairs, is that the right thing to do? Contributions and subsidies, so there's again varying offers throughout the industry. Leak allowances, again, some companies do, some don't. And so what is it we're offering? Is it a service or is it leakage that we're offering to bring down? So our policy history, directly with South West Water, bit of a journey that we've kind of been on. So for years, we've had the customer leakage has been driven by customer service, really. In 2020, leakage reported was what was driving customer leakage. Where we are now, it's really water resource driven. Taking those three elements together, in the future, our policy really needs to combine all three of those elements. So if we start with the policy for the period when we were customer service driven, we've got a high meter penetration rate of over 80%. So the bill was really the driving force for a customer to be aware they've got a customer leak. So that was almost our method of leak detection, was a bill hitting the customer's doorstep. It's a motive for the customer, it's not a nice thing for them to go through. But a lot of this has been based on, rather the leakage itself, it's based on the monetary value of that bill. Again, the focus of repair is because of the bill. Repairs we did do some repairs for customers, so they were considered for vulnerability or affordability, and we would apply retrospective leak allowances. At least £10 million a year we were giving away on leak allowances. So again, if the customer went outside of policy, we would pay that because it was considered a service to the customer. All of the activities was completed by a centrally based office team, so there was no field-based staff. Although it was SIM and CMEX influenced, it never really had a good SIM and CMEX score with our customer leakage. So the routes for intervention for customer leaks at this point was high bills. So we'd move to the next period. So the policy for this period was reported driven. So in 2020, we all knew about the 50% leakage reduction by 2050. Change to the 7-day reporting meant that there needed to be something different. We at that point created an operational customer leakage field team. Within that, we also had an established framework with a find and fix contractor. It was Hydrotech, or our sole service provider for that. At this time, we were looking to give free leak repairs for leaks over 10 litres a minute. But what we did have was we had SLAs for repair times. We started to bring in some repair data, so we knew how many repairs we were doing, what sort of flow rates we were picking up, and how many times we were repeat repairing for customers as well. So through 2021-22, when this was all up and running, so 2020 it started, by 2021-22, over 12 megalitres was saved through that period of time. So we also looked at, in terms of how the leakage was detected, or that intervention, so high bills, so detected, it became a much bigger part of our active leak detection was around customer leaks, and then other customer contacts, so we promoted a lot to customers to say, please call us if you have got a leak, so visible leaks, changes in consumption, not just high bills. So the policy for now is now changed to being resource driven. So there was a genuine water scarcity in Cornwall throughout this summer, exceptional holiday population increase. We know that our distribution input again this year hit record levels. So not blaming anyone in the room, but just think about where you're going on holiday this year, please. That coupled with it being the driest period in history. So as I said, record demand came in, and we believe there's an element as well through COVID. There's been a bit of a change in the population in Devon and Cornwall. A lot of people working from home. We have a large number of second homes. We've seen our distribution input slowly rise over the last couple of years, and we believe that's what it's attributed to. We don't know definitely. So what that led to is a temporary use ban. We are in fact still in that temporary use ban in Cornwall. We've also put other things in place outside of customer leakage. So lots of things we're doing differently. So we've also got some financial incentive for customers. If we can get our reservoirs up to a certain level, there is a financial incentive for the customers to use less water and help us restore our reservoirs. So we had to do something different in customer leakage. Absolutely necessary to reduce water and spotlight on us in leakage, the waste. So we are currently at this moment in time, a universal, free, no threshold supply pipe leak repairs are in place for us at the moment. That is not a policy, that is just what we're doing at this time. How long that will continue for, we'll wait and see. With preference for supply renewals where we can, so we've got a contracted price for certain distance, anything within that range we will renew as a preference. Especially on particular pipe materials, black poly, galvanized services. We're looking for quite a quick response on some of these as well, so we're trying to pick these up as quick as possible, keeping those run times low. We are still focusing where we can on high value leaks, so if we look at an equivalent to a burst main, we've had some customer leaks in excess of 5 cubes an hour. With those, if that was on a burst main, we'd be getting out there in a couple of days. So we're trying to bring down that time of getting out to some of these. We have obviously had to spend more money to do this, so we have more than doubled our budget and tripled our resources. We've got Hydrotech, as I said, for the find and fix, and we're also using Morrison's water services as well for our technicians. So there's a graph there just to show as well, that is actually a 10,000 litre an hour customer leak, which we managed to fix within about 7 or 8 days in the end. So the routes to leakage intervention now, we're looking at high bills detected. We're actually starting to look at we've got AMR meters, we're looking at AMR leak alarms, and some meter data. So we're looking as well with the detection team to see those increases on night lines. Is that attributed to customer leakage? And again, the direct contact from customers. So the interesting bit, what have we learned so far? So we have had an improved performance in terms of our water loss. Over the last 4 months, we've repaired over 9 megalitres worth of customer leaks. We have also improved our run times for customer leaks. We've reduced that by over 12 days since we've been running this. I have to say, we're only in our infancy here. This may change. We've only been doing this for a short period of time, but at the moment, everything is looking that it's improving that performance that we've got. We believe there's a service improvement to this as well. Doing free leaks for customers at the moment, we're having a lot of satisfied customers. We need to see that shine through CMEX as well, though. It's reducing the number of leak allowances that we're giving out, and we have, by offering this service, it's really improved customer awareness of leaks as well. So the other thing it's done, not just improved performance, the really interesting bit is improved our data. So we're getting, because of our high meter penetration, we're getting all the data on how many leaks we're fixing, what are the flow rates on those, what we're saving. So what we do know at the moment is what we were missing before is 60% of our leaks are actually under 10 litres a minute. So the majority of the actual leaks are there. However, the actual volume of leakage is in the bigger stuff, although there's less of them. 80% of the overall leakage volume is in the over 10 litres. So the need for us to move on that as quick as we possibly can is essential. But there is another side here of, although the 80% is on the high value leaks, that 20%, although they're small, there will be some point where they become these big leaks. So does it make sense to still fix them as well? We need more data, really, is what we're saying at the moment, I think. As much as it's improved performance, it's improved the data, it's not been plain sailing so far. We know some of the issues that we have in terms of dealing with customer supply pipes, private land issues, complex engineering, reluctant customers, shared supplies. So managing customers' expectations through this has been pretty difficult for us, but we have had the benefits. So the future, what does that mean going forward? We know we are with 2050. At the moment, if someone was to look and say, if we were becoming supply pipe adoption, does that happen? We're in a really good place. We know what works, what doesn't work when we're offering this service at the moment. Over the next year or so, however long we keep this up for, this is running because of the temporary use bans. While we're still in that, we'll continue to run this service. Does that change our policy going forward? Does that put us in a good position if by 2050 we have taken on supply pipes as ownership? We are running a green recovery initiative, so this was already in place before we put the unlimited no threshold repairs in. So that is a pseudo adoption of pipework which we've got going on in North Devon. £81 million investment across the green recovery. This is part of the Smarter, Healthier Homes, which is looking to pseudo adopt supply pipes. So we'll learn a lot from that over the next 3 years. So, as we alluded to, is repair intervention the best option? At the moment, it is for us. Do we change that? Do we have incentives and punitive options for customers? Should there be a sliding scale of contribution for private fixes and renewals? Or a sliding scale for leak allowances, from a full allowance, to not giving any based on when the repair is done. But what we have found so far is identification, measurement, and control is absolutely key. We're in our infancy of doing this. We are planning smart AMI rollout. That will give us far more information, and that for us feels like that's where we want to be at the moment. So the future routes to leakage intervention. It's got to be meter leak alarms, smart meter readers. So although we still have a large number of visual read meters, meter readers are going through a program being trained to spot leaks and flag them up in the first instance. Detected leaks, and then that customer awareness as well. That is it from me. I think there's some questions at the end, is that right?
Yeah, questions at the end. So thank you very much, Martin. This was, really. Yeah, thank you, Martin. Really insightful presentation, how these different drivers, in particular the drought, has shaped your, maybe not the policy, but certainly you were agile enough to make changes and review them in terms of the medium to long term. So really excellent presentation. Thank you very much. So going from the southwest to the east, we're going to Anglian Water, and we've got Doc Spencer, Head of Smart Metering in Anglian Water, and Adam Gray, Leakage Data and Insight Manager. So the two gurus that are going to tell us a bit more about how smart metering and the data and insight has kind of shaped their customer supply pipe policies. So over to you guys.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Afternoon all. Very full room for this time in the afternoon. Usually used to speaking to far fewer people. Adam and I are going to be taking you through really the transition from what we learned at trial, which was my vehicle, into scale up and roll out, where Adam and the Water Data Insight team are mining vast amounts of data to get far better intelligence. As many of you will know, I've complained in the bar, he's got all the interesting slides this afternoon, so I need to get through mine as rapidly as possible. The size of the prize, these are the water savings that the smart metering program has to deliver. You can read the numbers yourself, but to put it in context, it's about 50, this 10-year smart metering program we're partway through has to deliver about 50% of the overall saving that our entire 30-year metering program did, getting us to 90% penetration in the first place. The journey, I'm not going to take you through the river. We've been at it pretty much 6 years, kicked off in 2016 with the proof of concept trials. There have been highlights. Winning Team of the Year at the Utility Awards in March this year was a definite highlight. There have been lowlights, our program being at stop for 3 months at this time last year because of the global microchip shortage. The one bit that I would bring your attention to is Adam and his team have really only had access to operational data since earlier on this year, and that access has been growing and the learning's been growing. We took the decision that it was data to customers first and then data to operations second. The build of the smart meter data infrastructure has been a huge undertaking in-house. We stand by our decision, but it's meant we've only really just started to get the learning from the data it produced. Those of you that have been following this map will see that it's even more coloured in than it was last year. We've expanded our programme, and fairly soon we will have the brightest tapestry in the entire country with all of these in different colours. We're going to have to pick different colours for AMP8, but additional planning zones added. Some of the bits and pieces about how we manage the programme, the KPIs that are core to it, and the technology itself. The achievement, we're now starting to get a growing number of DMAs where we have 90% penetration, which is where Adam gets all his great slides from, which be all of my slides. Not salty about that at all. So, the trial data, 17,500 metres, 153 million reads a year. That's not small data, but that's still Access and Excel and a team of analysts talking to customers about pretty much every leak. Adam and his team, 3.8 billion reads a year. That is big data and very difficult. You've seen before, leak location, hugely dominated by internal in the blue, external CSPL, unknown. Even with our project team, we didn't get to speak to most of our customers about it. Largest number that we identified, internal leaks, very small number in terms of external customer supply pipe leaks. In volume terms, about 50% unidentified. We think it's dominated by plumbing loss. Still a goodly volume for internal, but yes, customer service pipe leaks are still bigger than internal leaks. Public enemy number one internal leaks are toilets, and public enemy number one in the design of toilets is the push-button drop valve toilet. Although they leak at a slightly lesser rate than a siphon toilet, they do so more often. So 50% when you've got a team involved. The yellow patches here, we had technicians talking to our customers, helping them to fix their leaks. We lost them in the summer of 2018, that purple patch, and we stalled in terms of how much plumbing loss in the blue we managed to get rid of. And then they came back, and we were able to drive it down, further learning the type of letters that we use, the interaction that we use. That was Newmarket going live, that was Norwich going live. And you can see where we get to speak to customers, we can eradicate internal and external leaks. Not the same with unknown, those customers that will not speak to us, those stables in Newmarket that won't let us in. Come to AMP7 rollout, you can see the tiny little sliver that we get to find out about. 122,000 leaks, we don't have the time to speak to these customers, we don't have the systems to capture it. And this is the sliver where Adam gets to find out all the interesting stuff. And again, going back to Martin, leak volumes, orange volume, blue numbers of leaks. All of the volume is in the high value. So this is where we want to concentrate our leakage effort, but this is the customer service element of it. Avoiding that conversation with our customers when they find out they're paying £200 a year more than they should have been. Oh yeah, we've known about that leak for years. Not a conversation we want to have. So having to tell our customers where their leak is and could they fix it, please? At which point you get the interesting stuff from Adam.
Thank you, Doug. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam. I'm here to talk you through how we're using the smart meter data to date. Hopefully give you some insight and share the early learning that we've had using the data, because I know there'll be a few people in this room going on this journey in the next few years. We'll come onto the chart in a second, but before I come onto the chart, I think the first thing to highlight really is, kind of as Doug's already hinted at, GDPR and ensuring that you can use this data in the right way. It is personally sensitive data. There was a lot of time, as Doug said, upfront around making sure this data could be provided to the customer, but not really much time on how we can use it for operational reporting leakage. So we had to spend some time with the legal team, taking on that journey, explaining to them what we wanted to use the data for, how we wanted to use it, before we can get to the point where we can share it with you today. That way. As you can see from the chart here, the first thing we looked at was night usage from our smart meters. To begin with, we took the whole data set, which was 450,000 smart meters, and tried to build up a night usage trend. But what we found quite early on is that it's quite difficult to do when you've got new smart meters coming on constantly throughout. So we moved over and we built a baseline for our data, going back to the 1st of the 4th, 21. And that's the trend you can see on the chart in front of you now. I've called out some really key and interesting points that we've spotted so far from the trend. The first one, number one, is around New Year's Day, and actually we saw a massive jump in night usage on New Year's Day, which I think everyone would expect, because obviously we have people up and about in the early hours of the morning, but it wasn't something that we'd ever seen on our night use models in the past. We've got the second one, which is around Ramadan in 2022. Again, our night use models typically didn't show this, but from our smart meter cohort, we're able to see quite clearly the step up in night usage. And then the last one is around, obviously, the summertime, and you can see the demand changes from the cohort. And again, night usage, a really big step up when it comes to summer demand. There is also a slight underlying trend where we're reducing night usage over time in this cohort, and we'll come on to it later how I think that's linked to continuous usage. Once we've built the cohort and we've got our night usage, we then looked at how we split it by acorn category, which I know a lot of people look at. Won't go through all the details, but just to call out some of the key points again, night usage during New Year's Day is visible across all the different acorn types. Ramadan, it was particularly visible on acorn categories 4 and 5, and the hottest day and the summer demand was most visible on the acorn categories number 1. Once we looked at acorn types, we then moved on to property types, and how, again, we can see night usage changing across the various different types of properties. New Year's Day was also visible across all the different types of properties. Ramadan, we didn't really see at all on our detached properties, and summer demand wasn't really very visible from a night use point of view from flats. Once we'd finished looking at night usage, we then moved on to PHC, so per household consumption, so daily usage. Slightly different points to call out on the chart here, but essentially the key areas that we kind of highlighted and the insights we saw were around Christmas, the summer demand, and what I've kind of called the post-summer 22 drop. Some clear observations when it comes to acorn. So Christmas and summer demand, we can see very clear on acorn types number 1, way more prominent than the other acorn types. And the drop that we've had in PHC after the summer period is visible across all the different acorn types. And again, the same analysis, but this time across property types. So you can see demand changes when it comes to PHC are less visible on flats. But again, this dip that we've had after the summer period is visible across all the different types of properties, which is something we're very interested in, but no real kind of view on what it actually is yet, although some theories. After we looked at per household usage, we then moved on to continuous usage, and how we've defined continuous usage is any properties where all the hourly reads are positive in a day. What we did is we created data sets grouping all the customers together on a monthly basis of when their meter was installed, and we tracked their average night usage over a period of time. And what we've seen from that is a reduction in all of the cohorts, as you can see from the chart. And their continuous usage has been going down, which we suspect is related to the work that we've been doing with the customers around their behaviour and also to reduce the leaks. Now, a couple of interesting case studies, which hopefully, based on the conversations today, might get people's thoughts going. So this one is a DMA that we've actually got at nearly 100% smart metered. You can see the two lines, hopefully. The darker line is the DMA flow meter during the night period, and the lighter blue line is actually the flow from all of the smart meters during the same period. And actually, they are very, very close to each other. They are within 0.02 litres a second. And I think just to kind of highlight, when it comes to things like the reporting methodology, if we were to report using the way we would normally do things in the Ofwat reporting method, this would actually give us a negative leakage because we would use our average company night usage. But if we were to use the smart meter usage and give us a DMA specific night usage, we'd actually end up with no leakage in this DMA because the continuous usage is actually very minimal as well. There's hardly any customers with continuous usage in this DMA. Now, we know not all DMAs will give us this sort of behaviour, but it does kind of show you how you can use smart meter data for reporting in the future. And the last one is around how you can potentially get value from smart metering for targeting. So again, this DMA is at 100% metered pretty much. Before we had the smart metering, it had a MAU, which was very similar to the blue line. When we had smart metering fitted, what we noticed is we have a gap between the total sum of all the smart meters and the DMA flow. After some investigation, we identified there was actually a small leak or a comms pipe leak in this DMA. We were able to obviously fix that leak and bring the two trend lines back into line with each other. It kind of just shows you how you can use smart routing, not only just for reporting, but also for targeting, and actually gives you that insight that you may not have from your models. And then just final conclusions. Obviously, we're on a journey with smart metering data. We are still quite early on in this journey with a lot of unanswered questions. And we will be looking to work with the industry now around how we can actually use this data further to understand some of the things that are highlighted on the screen. There's a few upgrade projects and things on the leakage route map that we're going to be feeding into, just to share all of that knowledge with everyone else. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doug and Adam. I'm sure there will be quite a few questions coming up, so keep using Slido, and after the next session there will be obviously a question and answer opportunity. So we're going to the last presentation of the day, and this presentation is done by Paul and Reese, and it's basically a kind of bit of a feedback on the most recent future water workshops that we held around customer supply pipe leakage, and also give a good perspective of the supply chain, the key input into solving some of these issues. So just a quick introduction. Obviously, Paul has close to 30 years experience working with NGOs, charities and trade organizations. He's been very involved over quite a few years within the water industry, and developed a lot of good ideas towards promoting obviously all the various stakeholders from supply chains. And we also got Reese here. Reese has got 6 years experience of working with WRC, mainly in the areas of leakage network and other industry related issues. So Paul and Reese, over to you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Firstly, well done, Judith. I think you've got the event running on St. Nicholas Day, I believe, so that's a positive. First, it might be the 23rd Leakage Conference, but the first one during a World Cup. Interesting. And of course, there's a big game this weekend, and I'm talking about my team, Bradford City, going away to play at Gillingham, of course. Up the Bantams, absolutely. It's great. It's great to be here, and it's great to sort of look around the audience to recognise a few people. But I'm also pleased to know that Grace and Justine this morning opened the event as part of the Institute of Water's Rising Stars. I'm a big believer in getting more and more younger people involved in these events, and I think we need to do more. We need to up our game on this one, because it's all part of the future. I'm just going to run through a few quick slides as to setting the background, not just to what the custom side leakage workshop highlighted, but also the challenges that we're facing. So we had a whole load of supporting organisations and sponsors for the event that we did. It's part of Networks November. We're using November every year to highlight the underground, personally getting fed up of pipes and sewers just being forgotten about because they're underground, obviously not this audience. And I've included this slide because I had a very, very, very healthy discussion with someone in my neighbourhood who does not believe that the climate's changing. For those who don't know, this is the Keeling curve. Look it up online, but they've been recording the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere for a long time, and they've used core samples to go back several thousand, well over 10,000 years, I think even 100,000. And you can see where the CO2 is going. Climate change is not just with us, but it's increasing. And that's the challenge we've got in the sector that we're in. We're facing events that are changing rapidly. I've used this slide before, and apologies for some of those of you who've seen it. My favourite bit of this is the one of the globe. It's a composite produced by NASA during July. They've never seen the Earth as hot as this before in all the data that they have. And this slide shows two different versions of London. One, well, a year ago, July, when there was flooding in the underground. You can see Stratford Station there, but actually for those who were in Victoria Station, it was shut. The last time it was shut was due to a bomb scare. And on the right, you fast forward 12 months and the source of the Thames is virtually dry, and the Thames there, that is not Thames at low tide, by the way. We're facing these challenges regularly. And this year alone, those of you're all out there working in the industry, you know how much demand increased during those months in July and August. It was phenomenal. And this is the context of the challenges that we're trying to manage. Yes, we're all here talking about things to do with leakage, but we've got drainage and wastewater management plans. Where do the water resource management plans fit into this? We've got to drive for net carbon zero. We've got the environment bill that's now in force, and that's driving a lot of change in the industry and will push up what we do around quality. How do we balance all of this out? The Venn diagram has that little bit in the middle, but those trade-offs to get to that middle is absolutely huge, and that's the context of what we're all managing. Now, we ran a customer-side leakage session as part of, well, in a precursor to Networks November. Rhys was there with us. It was brilliant that he was there, and he kindly reported back during Networks November some of the key findings. So over to Rhys for the next bit.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so as Frank mentioned, I'm Rhys from WRC, and I'm going to give a basic overview of what went on at the workshop and the key findings we had from that. So I don't want to spend too much on this diagram because I'm sure everybody knows it and is fed up of it. But would like to say one of the key point on there is the 1/3 of leakage, or is it? Because that was one of the key outcomes of the workshop, really, that everyone felt was the uncertainty around customer supply pipes, both in terms of quantifying that leakage and also in terms of how many pipes do we have, how much is it going to cost, and what are we going to do with them in the future. And that was a key focus. And as you can see here, we had a variety of different attendees, including a toilet manufacturer, which was the first time I'd met a toilet manufacturer, so that seemed exciting. So this is the scale of the challenge. And once again, the key thing to mention there is the number of unknowns. So how much length of supply pipe is there? We don't really know. How much water are we losing from them? We don't really know. Our estimates vary from about, from our minimum to the potential maximum is more than doubling. So we really don't have an idea of what that is. And then there's also similar sort of uncertainty in terms of the internal leakage as well, around toilets, leaky loos, how many are there, how much water do they lose, how likely are they to continue in the future as well. And there was this really great graphic that Paul's team produced at the event that I think's great to look at here, and you'll see I've recycled some of these pictures in the future slides that really kind of give insight into the different things we were talking about. So the first thing we talked about was where are the leaks? So internally, leaky loos, as most of us will know, are the biggest source of leaks. And externally, most of the leaks are, of course, on joints, which is also well known. So that's around bends, boundary boxes, and a variety of different joints. That's where the leaks are stopping. And there was a lot of discussion around, if you're looking to minimize customer side losses, looking at the prevent angle, reducing the number of joints was a really key focus that we discussed there. So yeah, on that note, looking at Palm, so there was the ideas around prevent were about the new pipes we're putting in, as well as replacements, and it was great to hear earlier on as well about lining. We also had a discussion about that at the workshop as being a key area where there's potential for improvement. And then on aware, we discussed metering. Metering is the really key option, and looking at leak alarms and also in terms of volumes, and then enabling customers to notice their own leaks as well. Then looking at locate, there was also a discussion around, can we locate leaks better, even on a customer basis? Or alternatively, can you mend without having to find the leak along a customer's driveway and reduce the overall footprint that we're making? And then on the mend, the key finding that we really had, what everyone was talking about was, should you mend at all in a customer side loss case? And in terms of supply pipes, is there really a case to make a small fix when it's relatively cheap once you've already dug the hole to replace that pipe? And should that be the new go-to solution for customer supply pipes? So going back to this slide discusses things around kind of adoption and not just adoption, but the overall uncertainty that we have with regards to supply pipes. So we don't know the scale of the problem, and say we were to adopt, say we were to change our policies, how do we know how much it would cost? And we don't even know where any potential funding would come from. And that goes to the point that everyone felt that a decision needs to be made about customer supply pipes. And that's not just saying to the regulator that a decision needs to be made around the ownership, but it's also up to us as an industry to look to form a consensus on that so that we can make recommendations and we can say that we think the solution for this is going to be moving in this direction. Because currently there's a lot of uncertainty that's impeding people acting. Nobody knows if in 10 years' time we will decide to adopt, or what policies will be in place, or if it's possible to hit our leakage targets with the current policies. So that was a key area of uncertainty that people felt in the workshop we should address. Then we discussed some of the challenges, and you can see the first few points here have very customer focus in terms of what the customer's incentives are for fixing it, and the overall feelings of everyone was there aren't very many. It's generally cheap to let the leak keep running, and it's generally not cheap to fix it. And that's combined as well with the inconvenience of it. And then we discussed around how can we help customers, and discussed a lot of the findings that many people have had of the more help you give to customers, the less they like you, and leads to a lot of negative customer interactions due to poor reinstatement and things like that. And there was also discussion around uncooperative customers that, well, as Martin mentioned, a lot of customers won't allow you access to the property, won't talk to you, etc. And then the final point that we discussed, which I think is definitely an undervalued point when it comes to customer side losses, is around non-households. So how do they fit in to the equation? And there's a lot of different factors around that. So the first one that I've put up there is around the reporting angle. And obviously leakage on non-household customer supplies isn't currently leakage, but in reality it is. And if we're looking to reduce the overall DI, then that leakage needs to be accounted for somehow. Currently it's just water delivered. Whether that's going to count towards leakage figures or whether that needs more incentives for businesses to address their own leakage is obviously an issue that needs addressing. And also around working with retailers, and how, if you want to help those customers, how do you do it without interfering with those retailers or getting negative RMX scores. And we also discussed the possibility of a household retail market, and what if that ever did happen, what position would that put us in with regards to helping customers fix their leaks and giving them incentives to do so. That's it from me. I'll hand it back over to Paul.
Thanks, Reece. Yeah, when we, as Frank mentioned, you know, what does the supply chain do? Well, we explored what we mean by asset health. Do we really understand asset health? And when we did a poll amongst some of our people online, there's a real mixed bag. Only a few thought they really grasped asset health properly, and that's critical to this, not just customer side, but obviously mains leakage as well. And if we get a better understanding of that, we'll understand where the risks are. The customer pipes may all be fine, but there may be some underlying issues we just don't know about. So what we did, we're producing a scorecard across all things pipes and sewers and asset health and research and innovation, etc. But obviously for this session, we'll just repeat back to you what the scorecard figures were for customer side leakage. And as you can see, we try to do a school one, you know, A+ down to F. By the way, it's that way. Don't assume it's A+ down to F in relation to asset health and leaks and mains. It's not. And we've done this so that we can start talking about why we came up with the scores, and then we're going to put it out to everyone, and we're going to have a part of a column that talks about what would your views be on improvement. So we had another artist working with us to come up with this. So I won't touch on the leakage one. I'm happy to chat about that afterwards. But in terms of customer side leakage, we came up with D. And part of the reasoning for that is that the situation's complex. It's already been mentioned, about 40% of households not really being metered. And as Reece has mentioned, we've got the non-household market as well. The customer side leakage areas are not fully understood. Yes, we've had Doug talking about the fact that maybe a lot of this is on the plumbing side of it rather than the pipe side, but we're still in that area. We don't know the proportions of that. And I think, as has been mentioned anyway, the responsibilities are not understood as well. If I talk to my neighbours, they do not know that they have to look after the customer supply pipe. I think the other challenges are where the meters are actually used, where there is metering. It's not at the property wall boundary, it's at the mains customer supply pipe boundary. That raises its own challenges. And of course, we've mentioned that the 265,000 kilometres of customer supply pipe, I know it's an estimate, but that is the last bit of pipe which water flows through before it goes into a customer property. So that in itself is something to be aware of. That's why we ended up with the score of D. And what we said about improvements, well, some of it's been touched on. Anyway, I was very interested, Mike, about the pseudo adoption. I think there's lots of things we can do in that space. I think as new properties are built, we can look at the adoption of the customer supply pipe as part of that process. So we do it step by step, not looking at dealing with the whole issue all at once. There's obviously the lead issue in the background as well, and that needs to be thought of and managed. But as properties are sold, perhaps there's an adoption element linked to that, and maybe an adoption element after the customer supply pipes are repaired. So the improvement side of it can be done step by step, and maybe that's part of the way forward. But anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul and Reece. Yeah, please join the rest of the panel. Do we have Stuart still available as well on the actual panel? We've got around 15 minutes of questions now. We've got some questions on Slido, but obviously we would like to get your views from the room as well. I've got one question, so I'll start off with that. Yeah, I think Steve and Stuart, is one of your slides you mentioned around the project that the outcomes will be ready for AMP8 kind of decision-making process. So I'm very much aware that every company is now forming their view of their interventions around long-term leakage, in particular down to AMP8. Are you ready to feed into that process? Because some of the findings obviously might indicate that maybe a slightly different long-term or medium to long-term approach of intervention has to be taken. So I suppose my question is, are some of these results be able to be used by water companies in time for at least their final submission?
Okay. So I can answer for the club project. Yes, the club project, we will have, well, we've already produced a report. So some of that will be there in time to feed in. On the Ofwat project, I think it's more suitable for Stuart to answer that.
Yeah, we won't have all of the answers for AMP8 clearly, but we will have some idea of what the alternative options are. So instead of just accepting the accepted wisdom that leakage background leakage is due to a lot of small leaks, and we need to do mains replacement or pressure management. There may be something in AMP8 about doing more research, more work to do detailed investigations of these outlying DMAs that have high MAL levels and so on. And we might over the course of the next 12 months find some hidden leaks in the DMAs that we have done surveys for in the Ofwat project. But certainly we won't have all of the answers, but we will hopefully give some guidance for the companies for AMP8.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the floor? Dean?
Hi, Dean Marshall, Artesia. I guess this is probably a question for Doug and Adam. Just picking up on one of the points that Reece made in the last presentation. Have you started to look at any of the smart meter data on non-households and seeing what there is in terms of continuous flows and high usage in those areas?
You're mining the data.
Yes, Dean, we've got about 9,000 non-household smart metered customers, and yes, we've been looking at the continuous usage of those customers, more so in the last few weeks, really. It does show quite a high level of continuous usage compared to domestic customers, but it's still something we're exploring.
Yeah. On a more sort of tactical fix-it basis, we've picked an initial, it's only a group of about 20 high-flowing leaks, and between them there's half a meg in 20 leaks. So in comparison with domestic, the fixes are huge, which I think has been Thames' experience as well throughout.
Any other questions?
Hi there, Axel Randolph, Thames Water. You mentioned there's still work going on to understand that drop in continuous use, but curious if you would have any leading theories that you're looking at if you think about broader context of the economy, or, you know, it seemed like a fairly quick drop off after the summer. Anything you're willing to divulge at this stage?
Was that for the per household consumption?
Yeah.
Because
we've seen it too.
It's difficult to know. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, obviously, in the world, in the UK right now. Cost of living probably is driving a different behaviour, but how much of that is that drop at this point? And it's really difficult to know.
Question over there.
Hi there, Stuart Henderson from Aquam. I've got quite a lot of experience in the water retail side. I worked for Business Stream and Water Plus. I just wanted to understand from the panel how much engagement there's been with the retailers, because that does seem a bit of a gap when we're talking about customer side leakage being such a high proportion. Then the customer leakage and continuous use on non-domestic has got to be massive. And I just wondered how much engagement and why they're not perhaps represented today.
Sorry, I was struggling with the lights to see where on earth is that voice coming from. Would you mind repeating the core of the question?
I was just asking, with water retailers, how much engagement has there been with water retailers, given that they have such a huge impact on customer side leakage, or could have such a huge impact on customer side leakage?
Yeah, I think that's the key, could have. Through the process of building the smart meter data infrastructure, as I referred to with domestic customers, we've had to choose what elements we've been able to stand up in order. Fairly early on, we stood up what's called the RDE, the Retailer Data Exchange. So that gives retailers access to all of the hourly data for non-natural persons and daily data where we judge that it's a natural person. We've only just started mining the leakage data for it, and our colleagues in our wholesale service centre are right in the middle with Mosul, driving a lot of that liaison work with retailers, and yes, we want to take them on the journey as well. But I mean, similar to the question this morning, as David said, my colleague David Jacobs said, we undeniably are going to wind up in a lot of cases just going direct to the consumers, to the non-households themselves. I think certainly for larger leaks and more urgent cases.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that as well. So in South West, we are actively fixing non-household leaks.
That's encouraging to hear.
Just to throw a totally different angle at it.
Quite often the retailers are putting on AMR themselves as well. And do you have access to that data? The likes of Tesco have done rollout of AMR across their entire portfolio through retailers. Are you able to access that side of data? And if not, there's maybe an opportunity there.
we're not AMI or AMR'd with, we have got some of it is for just logged customers. So some of the non-household logged customers, we're going through some of that data that's thrown up where there is continuous night use. We've approached those customers to repair leaks for them. But some of it has come through just natural leak detection, as well as any kind of proactive looking at meter data.
Yeah, the question then around the practicalities of metering non-households with smart metering. Do you have your own device on there, and the retailers got their device, or do you share data? What is the path that you've taken there?
In some cases, yes. Where we have established third-party loggers, because some retailers or some non-households themselves need access directly to data. We split the pulse and we take our radio data, they take theirs. We're hoping that we're slowly going to reconcile and homogenise, and that it will all come via the smart meter data. Yeah. But there are a very few cases where sites need online data to manage facilities, and at the moment our smart meters are hours in arrears, so it simply wouldn't see them.
Yeah. Okay. Question for Steve. Well, Steve, sorry, and Stuart as well. So the initial findings that you've got from your projects. The question is, does your study support the idea that mains replacement won't in itself solve your leakage challenge?
I think that certainly projects I've been involved in the past have indicated that mains replacement does not necessarily lead to reductions in lowest achieved leakage. In fact, there are some I can think of where it's led to increases, but mains replacement seems to me to be both a very expensive and quite a risky approach to reducing background leakage. I think but that's sort of personal experience. But from this project, I don't think the project specifically says anything about whether background leakage whether mains replacement is a good solution, but I don't think it is. I think it's expensive and risky.
The first project that Steve and I worked on together was in Yorkshire Water in the mid-1990s in Huddersfield. Do you remember those, Steve?
I do.
And that was replacing mains to reduce leakage during the drought. And we found all sorts of things, but whether the mains replacement itself reduced leakage or not, I don't know. We've been involved in various projects since then together. When you do replace mains, you find all sorts of things like hidden connections and hidden consumption and this sort of thing. But is that the right way to reduce leakage in that particular DMA? I'm not convinced.
Okay. Any more views on that on the floor? Yeah. Any more questions, Joe?
Question particularly aimed towards Paul and Reece with their workshop, but the next comments for Andrew and all of your Southwest. One of the things you identified, and I must say, I was really sorry I missed your workshop. It looked really interesting. One of the things identified was the lack of customer awareness of what their responsibilities are. And I wondered whether there was any reference to educate, rather than trying to educate customers direct, which has all sorts of issues, to educate those involved in property conveyancing, so solicitors, conveyancers, building surveyors, and the dreaded estate agents, because my experience is that they often aren't aware of this. And if people are buying a property, they ought to be aware of all their responsibilities. It won't get the people who've had properties for years, but at least it might start getting the message through.
Yeah, really good question, Joe. And yes, and I would throw into the mix the developers, you know, the Barretts, Countrywides and of the world as well. We did talk about the issue of, you've got, when you sell the house, the EPC in terms of energy, what's the water equivalent, and not just in terms of water efficiency, but something that then helps you look at where the ownership is, and the insurance industry, bring the insurance industry into part of that mix, and get them talking a lot more, because you're absolutely right. Talking to my neighbours, I sometimes feel like I want to bang my head on the wall in terms of understanding, and you know, they're not you know, the people that should understand these things, but it's not made clear to them. So I think there's a whole education process. I like the idea of the estate agents, actually. None of the ones in the area where I live near Bromley are aware of this at all. So that rate, you know, in terms of the customer, you know, the person buying the house, them being responsible for the customer supply power, they're just not aware. So yeah, but I don't know if Anglian or Southwest, you've got experience of this.
Not so much experience, but it came up in conversation this morning, and I can't remember whether it was Dean, Paul or Michael that said it, but all of us have bought houses and had structural surveys where we've been warned that our roof trusses aren't up to code, but at no point has anyone had a warning that you're buying a house with a galvanised iron service pipe, or let alone that you're buying a house with an existing service pipe leak. So yeah, it's something that we need to get into, right?
Maybe I should own up a personal interest. I have actually given lectures to building surveyors on this subject, mainly because I'm married to one. So.
Well, I mean, I might be wrong, but poor pressure is actually highlighted on their survey, isn't it, if your property falls into a poor pressure area? So why can't we add some information on your supply pipe to that? And so that comes up on your property survey. Yeah. Okay. At the back, Ian.
I can shout, don't worry. I've got two questions, if I may, just to make sure that I beat Michael Law on
I thought you're over your quota already, Ian, to be honest. I'm being very nice here.
Case you'll never get home. On the back of customer supply pipe leakage, our strategic policy statement from DEFRA requires us to encourage the sector to form a common approach to customer supply pipe leakage. So I guess my question is, do you feel encouraged? And also, you know, what can you do towards forming a consistent approach, and what further do you need from the regulators?
Who wants to start?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the common approach, Ian, is doing more of what we're trying to do as Future Water and bringing people together. We had most people in the room, you know, taking Joe's comment, we didn't have all the actors in the room, but that's also a positive starting point from the regulators. Well, I guess it comes down to that thorny question, doesn't it, of supply pipe adoption and how will that be moved forward? And if it is moved forward, as all of us have been involved in the drainage equivalent, we know it's not a straightforward process, and we know that money needs to be allocated, etc. And I'm one of these that believes that we get so caught up in metering in terms of people getting charged. Actually, let's use metering to measure. Let's decouple it from charging, but let's move down that route where we put the metering at the property wall boundary as a more common approach, not the mains and the customer supply pipe. Let's take a bit of a leap in this one. Other person, anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I agree. There is a need for a solution, and I think that if you know, I think water companies will struggle to agree on a consistent approach, because it's possible that there might not be a best solution for every single water company. And that's where I think it might be the role of the regulator to provide a steer and look at what an approximate consensus is in the industry. And it might necessarily be that there might be one or two companies where that isn't the perfect approach. But if there is regulated for that, then there at least will be consistency.
I think as well, just adding to that, Ian, the supply pipe adoption may raise issues linked to CMEX, and Reece mentioned this. You know, where pipe repairs are done, you can often find a customer complaining about the disruption. So I think we're going to go down that route. I think there needs to be some understanding of how that would impact on CMEX, and maybe there's an area there in terms of regulation where it shouldn't affect the water company in that context.
Right, will you indulge me with another question?
Quick one.
Oh my God, that might not be a quick one. Background leakage. If I've unpicked your fantastic paper, Steve, correctly, you broadly said that there's a few leaks that need to go and be repaired in the category that we would currently call background leakage. And I guess that poses the question to me as to whether or not we've set the definition between foreground and background leakage at the right place, which then poses the question is there any such thing as background leakage, or is it just a continuum with an arbitrary cut-off point in it?
I think that's what we're trying to find out in the Ofwat funded project, that, you know, is it possible to drive every DMA down towards zero leakage if you can find these long-running hidden leaks or other things? There could be customer side leaks, there could be large internal plumbing losses. But if we were to find everything in these DMAs, could we achieve zero leakage in every DMA at a point in time? Obviously, we can't sustain zero leakage in every DMA all of the time. We will get an outbreak, but can we bring the leakage back down to zero rather than down to this background level? That's one of the things we're trying to answer in the Ofwat funded project.
Okay. That's it. We run out of time. Very good discussion. So I would like to thank all participants again for your presentations. And I mean, we covered a lot, and clearly we don't have all the answers here, but again, I want to reiterate the tremendous amount of work that's been done in various ways, if that's through workshops, actually the Innovation Fund, and all other studies, and the individual water companies working towards really trying to tackle these quite difficult issues, and they're not solvable in a very short period, and it really needs to have that long-term plan. And from what I heard is that we're really on the route here, and we are on that route map. So I would like to thank everybody today, and again, thank you very much for this session. I thought it was a very good session, so I would like to hand over to Bob to close the actual conference.
You'll be all right. Well, I have to say, I've been reflecting on what we've heard today from the beginning, and I've got some specific highlights I can share with you in a moment, but I feel really positive about the stuff that we've heard today. Things are really starting to happen. We've got a long way to go. We've got a lot more work to do. I'm not challenging that, but some really positive stuff has come out today that gives me real confidence that we're going to hit our ambitious targets. And particularly, I've always felt from the route map perspective, we've got challenging targets, short and long term. And I've always felt that background leakage and supply pipe leakage are two areas that we should be working really hard on. These are, well, not really low-hanging fruit. We're still trying to understand this to a very large extent. But I think we've heard some really great stuff today about both of those areas, and I'm really encouraged. So in terms of the specifics, I'll just list a few of the things that stood out for me. Peter started by saying that no one company has all the answers, so we must collaborate. So that's a really obvious thing to say, I know, but it's worth repeating that. And I think one of the rising stars said, it's not just about saying that we want to collaborate or recognizing that we need to, it's actually about enabling collaboration and doing much more of it. I think they felt we weren't doing enough of that. I mean, the route map stuff is moving on really well. In Sean's session, we could see all of that. We're looking at you know, the refreshment of the heat map and the National Research and Test Centre, which is a really important step forward. I think there were one or two questions about the efficacy of that, I think, but I think that'll be a great facility for us to have across the industry. And Joe made the point as well, you know, we've got a big gap in terms of repair capability, and this represents 80% of the cost here, but things are starting to happen in that area as well, and we saw some good examples of that. I mean, seeing the resurgence of lining techniques, I reckon this is a really big area for us in terms of improving on what we did, you know, in AMP3 and AMP4, and hopefully having a facility that is longer lasting, cheaper, and therefore we can do more of that work. And actually, if it can be extended to service pipes, could take on board things like lead, which is another massive challenge for us as an industry, and an area of leakage as well, let's not forget. So really interesting about that, and interested in that, and that HydroSeal demonstration that we saw on the screen here. Yeah, and then this afternoon we heard about the troublesome DMAs and how progress is being made with the Thames Crowder WLS approach, and also the paradigm audit to really cracking the problems in these difficult DMAs. That's another major step forward that I'm sure many people are interested to hear a lot more about. But I think, as Stuart has said previously, are you still there, Stuart? No, he's not there now. As Stuart has said previously, you know, if we want to deliver the 50% target, we need to deliver on background leakage, because potentially it is such a large chunk of what we have now. And to hear that, well, actually, this may not be what we expected, like a very large number of small leaks, that you've got wide variability, but where you have background leakage, it is a smaller number of larger leaks. Well, I see that as a positive thing, because the larger those leaks are, the more chance we will have of finding ways to detect them and repairing them. And then customer side leaks. I mean, that Southwest Water presentation, sorry, I'm slightly biased. I used to work down there. Good to see you all again, guys. But that shows a targeted approach on customer side leakage, and the volumes that were talked about there, 12 megalitres a day, I think it was, that is absolutely material. And that's absolutely a magnificent performance. Correct me if I'm wrong, in a leakage figure about 70 or 80 megalitres a day overall, that sort of level? Is that about right, would you say, Martin?
No, so 9 megalitres in the last 4 months.
Yeah, I was just trying to compare that with the overall kind of...
Overall, 109.
Okay, yeah, so, you know, in that sort of wider level of leakage, it is material. So great to see the success on that. And then, of course, we've just heard about the supply pipe challenge or supply pipe conundrum, and really interested to hear what the outcome of your piece of work in North Devon will be on, you know, looking at supply pipe. I think you called it quasi supply pipe ownership. So it'd be really interesting to see whether a difference of approach there, and then a standardization of approach brings some benefits for us all and helps us on the journey. I mean, Anglian, the power of smart meters, that was the words that I think were used. And so many companies, including my own, have got smart meters just round the corner. Now, these are going to be such a great help. You know, since I've been in the industry and dealt with the majority of customers who are unmetered, it's always been the dream. You know, all of your customers metered, you can do those water balances so much more effectively. And to see a bottom up, top down, which is, you know, the district meter and the smart meters saying the same thing, that's really positive from my perspective. And then, of course, there's the customer angle there, in terms of getting that understanding across, and maybe adoption is part of the answer to get around that problem. But, you know, for me, this has been a great day. So it just leaves for me to thank a few people and say a few more things on the housekeeping side. Obviously, the materials will be circulated after the conference, links to the presentations and so on. I'd like to echo Frank's thanks to all of the speakers today. I think you've all done a tremendous job, including all the technology side with getting them coming in on the screen and everything. Well done, guys. Absolutely brilliant on that. Not without completely without any glitches at all. I'd like to thank our exhibitors. Have we got a slide we can put up of our exhibitors? I'm sure they've got one there, rather than me reading out the list again. But I think you've seen, I've really enjoyed the exhibition. There's a lot of kit in there. There's a lot of buzz going around in there. So thanks to them for their support as well. But most of all, thanks to everybody for coming today and engaging, asking lots of questions on Slido and in the room, and engaging with the subject matter. And I hope you all have a safe journey home. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, because it is that time of the year. Thank you very much.